the emotional release level that was seen both in duration and in intensity in 9/11.
Would that have anything to do with, let's say, the number of people that were possibly killed during that time? Because I know Jim McCanny is saying that he thinks there as many as 10 million people could have been killed during that tsunami and earthquake.
It's let's look at it this way. That I would say that it shades towards that, but we have to be very careful. I'm a cautious fellow, and so what I can say for sure is that we would certainly see a larger emotional impact if more people were emotionally affected.
Okay.
Okay, now that emotional impact, as we say with the terrorism power outage, it wasn't terrorism, but for an instant there, everybody feared that it was, and there was this mass wave of fear that came out.
Yeah.
So if we had something similar, it need not be an actual event. What if for 35 minutes, what if every human who could be connected by electronics in any way, shape, or form for 35 minutes next Friday was convinced that there was less than an hour for the planet to exist before a humongous asteroid snuck around the moon and killed us all? Okay? If everybody on the planet believed it, even for that brief duration, that would account for the level of emotional kind of release we're seeing, even though there would be no event. It would be a giant hoax or whatever. Okay. And even the hoax itself would have its own level of emotional interplay.
But you're saying, Cliff, that the coming emotional release could be that strong?
You ain't seen nothing yet. It's one of those deals, yes. And even that is nothing compared to what we're picking up on a 4-year projection, bearing in mind that the further out we look, the more vague everything becomes and our scale is much larger. But nonetheless, what we're looking at is something that will take 6 months or more to play out in an emotional release event. So, the emotional intensity that was on the TV airwaves and everywhere else during the period of time of the week of the actual Katrina disaster with everybody in New Orleans and so on. Imagine that stretching out over 6 months. At that level of intensity, that's what we're looking at.
What in heaven's name could bring about an emotional release? My gosh, that powerful.
Well, if any number of things could do it without requiring any real damage to the planet.
Yeah.
We can hypothesize that such would be the case if we had an Argentina-style collapse of the dollar, because the dollar is the global reserve currency. It would cause repercussions that would go on for years, and the initial emotional intensity would be horrific.
My gosh, that's mind-boggling.
I'm hoping I'm wrong.
I do
At
too,
this point,
but
I suspect our technology won't work anymore.
Yeah.
For a number of different reasons. There's any number of pitfalls that we can get into that would cause this whole thing to stop. And, of course, at any given time, I don't like seeing these nasty things, and so I say, boy, I sure hope we're wrong about this.
My gosh. Do you think, and, here is conjecture, we have talked at various times about the, let's say, sudden possible removal of George Bush from the presidency. Could it be something like that? No.
It wouldn't have the intensity that's required.
No kidding.
Oh, yeah, that wouldn't affect, if half the people, if most of the people on the planet hated him, it might be a big whoop for a day. But 6 months? Nah. Sorry. He's just not that pivotal.
He's not that important in the world. He's a screwball.
Vote for him or not vote for him, the world goes on.
Yeah.
The powers that be place the candidates in power, so it's not like it's a real democracy or anything.
Yeah, right, true.
So you go out and, you live way out in the backwoods like we do here, several thousand-mile buffer usually between ourselves and anybody from the Bush administration.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, they're really not all that meaningful.
Holy cow. Do you foresee something happening with the supposed indictments that everybody is...
Well, we've been seeing that for some time, and it's going to really hit Cheney hard. The last time we got into this,
Good.
What we're getting is 2 mountains are going to come and sit on Cheney's chest.
What do you think that is?
Well, probably mountains of evidence from separate sets of indictments.
Right. But
maybe we're wrong on that. Maybe there's 3, because I hear now that the French are going to indict him for money laundering through Halliburton.
The Vice President of the United States? Oh, my gosh, that's classic. That is absolutely classic.
Well, we have our great predecessors that he's trying to live up to, and I would say that I've got to give him credit. Cheney is a much bigger crook than Spiro Agnew ever thought to be.
Oh, gosh. And who are bigger crooks than the French? I mean,
they ought to know, yeah.
Yes, I know. Of any group in the world outside of New Orleans and Louisiana. My gosh, that's what. Now, do you think the 2 mountains on his chest? Remember, he's got a heart problem.
Oh, we foresee he's having a very uncomfortable period of time in his body. Yes. I don't know if Cheney dying suddenly, stress or whatever.
Yeah, right.
I don't think that would. I certainly can be wrong, but I don't think, given the current flavor of the times, if you will, I don't think that would generate enough impetus on its own to cause the kind of thing we're seeing.
Yeah. So this
may, in a weird kind of a way, like connections where, for want of a nail, the kingdom was lost because Cheney didn't do something or did do something or whatever. We may have had an economic issue arise that would not have otherwise. That kind of a thing. But it seems far distantly connected, if possible.
Cliff, do you see the possibility that Bush would be removed from office? Either
certainly, yeah.
Really?
I mean, it does not look good for what we call the Bushista entity, which are all those words that relate to the Bush ad.
Right. But
and it's increasingly dark. It's if you plot it separately within our grid, it appears to be in a downward spiral.
Jeez.
Forward progression is about one of our units forward, but for every one forward, it takes 3 or 4 steps downward in emotional values.
Boy, that's incredible.
I don't see how. At some point, say that. I mean, let me put it back to you. At what point does a poll number suggest that you're living under a dictator? If El Dictore has a 5% approval rating, is that an effective president or a leader?
Jeez.
Or is that a dictator?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's no question. But the problem is, or the question is, where is the dictating coming from? It's sure not coming out of Bush's mind.
Right. Except via remote control.
Well, that's what I meant. Now Cheney, he is devious enough where it could, but then, the 2 mountains, would it be possible that one of the mountains could involve Israel?
That's it's feasible, certainly.
Yeah.
And we do always run into the references that way, right? And so now we've gone to the trouble where we're actually working on the lexicon in those few minutes that we get the time, and we're trying to do a separation, because Israel is all bound up with everything from Nazis to Zionism to Judaism.
Yeah.
We want to be able to separate it out so that we can actually decide what context we're looking at. Because these Christian fellows running around thinking that Israel is proclaimed by God for existence and all of this sort of thing, and it has a tendency to color your data.
Sure.
And so, yes, in answer to that, there's one of the mountains is all tinged with words going that direction, but I can't say that I know that it's meaningful.
What about, interesting, gosh, I just had a great question, and it blew from my mind. But in retrospect, okay, of all the things that are building up, I see so much stuff in reference, like you just said, Cliff, on the internet and stories that people are saying. How much focus is there really going on in the world with Israel, and how much control do you think, or have you found, that Israel has over the destiny of the United States?
A great deal, I would imagine. There is certainly linguistic support for the idea that things are not as they would seem on the surface.
Yeah.
And in fact, small movements made in a small country cause large convulsions elsewhere.
That's interesting.
Now, there you go, though, see?
Yeah.
It's a real issue. You start saying anything about Israel and you're instantly an anti-Semite. And it's like, no, I'm not anti-Semitic. I don't hate any racial grouping whatsoever. I'm not even, or let me put it this way, I hate all racial groupings equally. I'm not really fond of humans in their manifest plethora of colors. I only like those that have got their brains together and have something worth discussing.
Sure.
So you can accuse me of a lot of things, but not necessarily of being any kind of a racial bigot.
Yeah.
And the real problem, of course, is that no matter how you come around in the current context in which we find ourselves operating to discussions about Israel in a factual manner, there will be the underlying racial attacks that are actually religiously based, which is odd. But nonetheless, it appears, and I have to say that there's linguistic support for this as well, that the context in which all questions about Israel are being asked itself is being manipulated.
So you don't even know who the manipulator is and who's being manipulated.
No, but you know that there is a hand behind the veil, as they say.
You betcha there is.
For whatever reason, it doesn't want people poking too closely into all things Israeli, Zionist, etc., and so it's trying an emotional equivalent of a Project Blue Book. And the Project Blue Book its whole goal was to provide a point of ridicule for all UFO reports such that we have an emotional tie, a shame issue, if you will, tied between UFO reports and the people who do it. Therefore, they won't do it because they'll be shamed by society. Now we're getting the same kind of pressure being applied to the Israeli question, only they're not able to or content with applying ridicule to it, and so they've gone for the deep and dark hate. They want you to be suspected instantly of being a hate crime person in some way for being anti-Israeli. And actually what they're trying to do is to instantly rephrase it so that you're not anti-Israeli, which defines a geopolitical arrangement, but they want you to be anti-Jewish, so it'll be something that truly is the hate crime. So it's all the linguistics are getting all messed up deliberately.
Yeah. Wow. Interesting, because if indeed so many of our strings are pulled by the Israeli powers that be, then you would almost say that what you just said, Clif, could be the antithesis of what is really going on, but because possibly these people who, if it's true, would have the ability through their propaganda, through their fear-mongering or what have you, to manipulate the webbot runs.
It's very difficult. The reason is that we really don't, I hate to put it so bluntly, but we really don't care much what people think. Okay,
because it is dealing with the subconscious mind.
Exactly. What we do is this. When the run goes through and, for instance, hits a garden discussion forum, and it finds something that is in our hit list, our pattern-seeking algorithm.
Right.
It doesn't actually, we actually have to go to some trouble to read the words that are underlying the messages that we receive and process. What we really end up with here in terms of the processing is a whole slew of 4-digit hex numbers. These 4-digit hex numbers are processed mathematically because they relate to a numeric value assigned to a particular grid reference